everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net and scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Paranormal Portal podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and I really appreciate you guys being right here with me as we go through yet another journey into the Paranormal Portal. And hope things are going well in your world. And thank you so much for all the love and support I continue to get from all you guys. It really means the world to me. And thank you to those of you who continue to recommend the show to new people. That's just an incredible thing. And I'm in your debt. But I've got an interesting show for you guys today, and this is one we don't do a whole lot of on the show because I only can do them when I get enough material. But today we're going to dive into the mailbag and go through some listener emails that I've received and dig into these. And I love these stories. Of course, I love talking to people, interviewing them, asking them questions and stuff, but not everybody wants to be on a show. Not everybody wants to deal with the stress of being on a show, and I completely understand. So if you're one of those people out there listening and you're like, God, I'd love to tell my story, but I don't feel I can do it, well, please email me your story at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and I will certainly narrate it to the best of my abilities and share it with our other listeners. But these stories are fantastic because these are people's experienced firsthand. These aren't, generally speaking, not handed down, not 4 or 5 people removed from the source. The people that wrote them are the ones that lived it. And so they are incredibly profound and they're exciting. And we're going to get into those now. So buckle up, everybody. We're going in. First up on the roster tonight, we're going to go into a story that was submitted to me by Patrick, a listener out there, and he wanted to tell us about a story he experienced. And he starts out, "Hello, Brent. I'd like to share an encounter with you that happened to my daughter and I back in 2009. It was December 2009. I lived in Yakima, Washington, with my family and an exchange student from Hong Kong. It was extremely cold and dry that winter, with very little snow in the mountains. We decided to take a drive up to the Little Natchez River and find a Christmas tree, something we'd never done before. We put on our warmest clothes and headed for the hills, stopping only to get a $5 Christmas tree permit from the ranger station. And after about 45 minutes, we were there. And with the light snow, we were able to drive quite a ways up the Little Natchez River Road. I finally found a little side road and turned uphill from the river. We drove up that road for about 200 yards, maybe a little less. We got to a stopping point, turned our vehicle around, parked, and we got out. It was in the single digits that day, but we all got out to start looking for the best tree. The first thing we noticed just a little ways off the road was an abandoned camp with 2 tents. Well, thinking it was a meth maker's camp, I had the children hold back while I went to take a look and see if it was safe. Seeing no sign of meth manufacture or paraphernalia, I signaled the kids to come on ahead. We all had a look around, and one tent had 2 sleeping bags in it, with one dragged halfway out of the tent, and the other tent only had one 50-pound bag of dog food. I looked at the bag and noticed how it had been opened. It had been poked through the front and peeled back from that hole like one would peel a banana. We also noticed a few utensils on the ground around the campsite. It appeared the campers there had bugged out, left in a rush, in other words. It left me feeling a bit on guard as the kids and I moved on to the big meadow where we looked around the perimeter for a tree. But we didn't find any. We did see a great trackway of a very large cougar, but really nothing else of note. Well, the kids were getting cold despite their heavy coats, so we headed back to the vehicle so that they could warm up. I announced that I was just going to go take a little walk up a little further up the road from where we parked and promised that I'd return with a tree. My 9-year-old daughter, Victoria, not wanting to miss anything, said she would go with me, so Victoria and I started up the road. The road was cut into a hillside with a wooded forest on the uphill side and somewhat bushy creek bed on the downhill side. To be more specific, the creek bed was very brushy with small trees growing so close together that we really couldn't see more than the outermost small trees. Eventually, we started seeing some trees that had some potential on the downhill side of the road, so we came to a stop and started looking more closely at our potential specimens. The forest was silent, except for the talking between my daughter and I, until we started hearing some brush cracking just downhill from us. My first assumption was that it was probably a person, so I started saying things in a loud voice like, "That's a good way to get shot at," and that sort of thing. But there was no response, just more cracking sticks and brush. We were cutting a suitable tree, all the while hearing the crackling of dry brush from below us down the hill. I started to get the feeling like we were being watched by whatever was cracking in that brush, and we might be getting stalked. Well, there's definitely some sort of animal moving around in the bush, carefully avoiding being seen, but not able to avoid being heard due to the dry brush and dry dead sticks on the ground below us in the creek bed. I was almost done cutting the tree with my small saw when from down the brushy creek came a different sound, a whistle. It was a short, 2-note whistle, not like a bird or any other animal that I knew. My daughter said, "Whistle back, Daddy, whistle back." I answered back, "I can't whistle right now, Victoria." I was too scared to whistle, but I didn't want to tell her that. Realizing that we were indeed being stalked, I finished the saw cut as quickly as I could, and I pulled the tree up off the hillside and sent my daughter ahead so I'd be between her and whatever, if anything, came up from that brushy creek bed. Well, thank God nothing did. We got back to our vehicle and tied the tree on top in great haste. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible, which is exactly what we did. Well, that's my story, Brent. Make of it what you will. I swear on the Holy Bible that this is all true. I just wanted to share this with you, and feel free to share it with others. Best regards, Patrick C. Yeah, the moments, these kind of stories are really haunting because I think clearly seeing a Bigfoot would be an incredibly shocking thing. But I think even not knowing what it is, but knowing it's not an animal that you know of, is maybe even a little more intimidating. Maybe not, but generally speaking, this is winter time. Well, it's early winter, but still, all the bears are going to be all bedded down and in hibernation mode. And there certainly are things like cougars, but they don't whistle. So what was it? I don't know. I think there is a pretty huge proliferation of Bigfoot activity all over the nation. And certainly this area up here in the inland Pacific Northwest and the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live, has plenty of it. But that's got to be creepy. And I think I'm just glad everything worked out okay. Certainly, if it was him, that would be plenty scary, but also having his young daughter with, I think, makes it just that much more intense, because not only do you have to take care of yourself, but you've got to keep your kids safe, and that's going to come before everything. So I'm glad it all worked out. That is really a creepy story. Is they don't know what they were hearing, but they do know something was there. So the whistling part, I think, is the worst. It's like, okay, well, that just subtracts a whole bunch of what it can't be. So I'm glad it worked out, and very cool story. Thank you very much for sending that in, Patrick. Next up, I got a story from a longtime listener of the show, and this is from Josh Casto, and he's been a great friend to me in the show, and he's actually branched off and started his own podcast. So it's a very cool thing, but a wonderful guy, incredibly supportive, and he's been a guest on the podcast before. Now, Josh is a regular watcher and audience member for the live streams, which happen on the YouTube channel every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. But I guess this must have been inspired after listening to one of the live shows. And here you go. Okay, never thought about this till last night's show. June 4th, 2025, which is when he had actually emailed me. So that's how long it's been sitting in my inbox waiting for more. So this was 95 or 96, and I'm 15 or 16 years old. This guy was scary as hell, and I had a crush on his daughter at the time, but my brother beat me to that. Anyway, we all knew him as Tarzan. We all heard stories about how crazy he was, rumors of even unaliving people. I wouldn't doubt that, but anyway, we were hanging out at a friend's house, which we did a lot. Kind of our party house at the time, but we were in one room hanging out, and the subject about Tarzan came up. And yeah, we were talking about how crazy he was. And then my friend notices out the window a huge white owl in the tree, at least 3 or 4 feet tall. White owl. Okay, around here, an owl close to that size is a great horned owl, but they are not white. But with a house full of Creek Indians, they all start freaking out. In Seminole folklore, the Stigini, or also known as the Stikini or owl witches, are a type of evil being, a cross between a human and an owl that bring disease and death. They're believed to be nocturnal creatures that can transform into 9-foot-tall undead owls, and they're said to prey on humans while they sleep. The Stigini are also associated with the screech owl and its call, which is believed to foretell death. They were Creek, but they fully believed in the Stigini. And that owl appeared right when we were talking about Tarzan. Well, we see the owl, and then something happened. And we all looked away from the owl, and then we turned back to look out the window, and the owl was gone. Suddenly, there was a knocking at the door, and we were all absolutely shocked. Well, one of us finally got up the courage and went to the door, opened it, and there was Tarzan. Okay, what the hell was that? As I've thought about that, I don't know, but I do feel like he was the owl, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way too. Also, I think he put a curse on my brother, because yeah, my brother screwed around with his daughter. And that was super creepy when I think he did it. He had a look of death on his face. He was sitting cross-legged in the back of a pickup truck, and he was chanting something in a native language while he was just staring at my brother. But yeah, that's about it. I truly believe Tarzan was possibly a shapeshifter. I truly do. He was definitely not a good person. Thank you, Brent. Love your show. Keep it up. Josh. Obviously, the subject of transforming human beings is kind of hard to unwrap. It's hard to intellectualize for our Western thinking. It's like, well, how does a person become an owl? How does that work? How could that work? But I don't pretend to know. But the interesting thing is that there are cultures around the world that have had legends and folklore and tales of people that could transform into other things. I don't pretend to understand it, but I also have to admit that the proliferation of stories like that across the globe is compelling. And these are many cultures that are absolutely geographically displaced from each other, and yet several of them came to that same conclusion that there were people who could become something else. And believe what you will. I don't know, perhaps there's other elements at work. Perhaps it's more of a spiritual thing than a physical thing. I don't have the answers. But I will tell you that throughout the course of doing this show, with things like skinwalkers and shamanism and witch doctors and all kinds of other in-betweens, transforming humans is not a new topic. It's an ancient one. So the question you have to ask yourself is there truth to that possibility? And maybe there is. You have to believe what you want to believe or what you can believe. And this show is not about convincing anybody, but these stories are literally as old as our culture. So could there be something to it? Maybe. But thank you, Josh, for the story. Thank you for all your love and support, for being a listener of the show. I really appreciate it. So next up comes listener Laura with her email, where she's talking about her experiences. So let's get into that now. When I was little, maybe 4 or 5, my room was upstairs and my bed was positioned so that I could see the stairs. My sister's room was right across from mine, with a bathroom in the middle of a little landing. I remember seeing a full-body apparition standing on the stairs, just looking at me. Well, of course, I was too young to know about ghosts and spirits, but I knew that he shouldn't be there. It scared me so bad that I started crying, and I kept putting my head under the covers, hoping when I looked again, he would be gone. But no, he just stood there staring at me. Well, my crying must have woken up my older sister, and finally she came and picked me up and took me to her room and put me in bed with her. I never did see him again, but you could definitely continue to hear someone walking up and down the stairs. I was born in that house, so I lived there until I got old enough to move out on my own. My parents lived there until their deaths, and both of them passed away in that very house. We heard him the whole time we lived there. My sister's kids and my kids all knew it was haunted, but no one talked about it until later on in life, and then we kind of figured out everyone knew about the house being haunted. He never bothered us, so we just let him stay in peace until we eventually sold the house. Well, now he's not being so nice, especially to the man that lives there. Needless to say, the man will not go up those stairs to this day, after one day he cussed out the old ghost and told him to get out. Well, he got grabbed by something ice cold that held him for apparently what seemed like an eternity. Well, that's my story. There are more things that happened in that house, but maybe I'll tell you those another time. Wow, that's very powerful. I mean, it's a presence, but it was a presence that must have known that house before you guys lived there. And it's kind of neat. I do think it's neat that people are able to live in peace with some kind of entity being around. There's two schools of thought about that. There are those people that say, look, their time is over, they need to move on. You shouldn't let them linger. And there's other people that kind of take the idea that, well, they're here, they're not bothering me any, so that's fine if they continue to be here. And I'm kind of more the latter personally, that if the activity isn't negative and it isn't causing harm or fear among the people that are living there, then go ahead, just live peacefully, I guess. I do think there is power, and it's a powerful idea to acknowledge the presence and yet lay down the rules. Look, it's okay if you're here and then lay down your rules, A, B, C, D, E, whatever those are. And then also adding on, but you're not allowed to scare myself or anyone else that might live here. You have to leave any pets in peace, et cetera, et cetera. I think that generally speaking, these intelligences, they don't want to cause trouble. They're here for whatever reasons they're here. And we can't pretend to know, of course, the idea these are formerly living people that are working through some issues or love the property or any number of explanations for why they might linger. And that's fine. But maybe they never were. But I do believe we're living in a world of spirits. We're swimming in a world of spirits. And we're probably surrounded by these things all the time anyway. Again, we're not usually aware of them, and probably they're not usually aware of us either. We just happen to be sharing a space in some way, in some definition. So, I don't know. I'm good with sharing space if you're comfortable with that. I don't know that there's an urgency. I don't know that there isn't an urgency. Maybe by letting them linger, you're setting yourself up problems later. I don't know. It's kind of anybody's guess, but I've certainly lived in many active locations and have been fine believing that there's a presence sharing that space with me. But to each their own. Certainly follow your hearts and follow your faith and come to your own conclusions. But very cool story. I really appreciate that, Laura. Thank you. Next up, I have a story from a listener who's going by the name of Becky. And she wrote in to share some of her experiences, so we're going to get into hers now. Hi there. I just had to hit pause on the latest episode, part 2 with Paranormal Paul, where he mentioned the flannel-wearing ghost. Here's some background. My Uncle Jason died in his early 20s, and there were many a picture of him in a Pendleton, which is the name of a brand of flannel, that were hanging around my grandmother's house while I was growing up. I was 5 years old when he suddenly passed away in an accident. I spent many hours staring at his photos and really wishing that I had the opportunity to know him better. Well, a few days after he died, my toddler sister was looking out the window and laughing at something. My mom asked her what she was laughing at, and she said, matter-of-factly, Uncle Jason, he's looking at me. Where'd he go? He would come around when my sibling was being naughty to scare them straight. He was there during a scary night in my 20s when a man entered a phone booth with me, tried to assault me. I tried fighting the man like a man, and then I heard my uncle's voice say, "Run." And boy, did I. Basically, he's been a sort of guardian angel for my siblings and I growing up, and into the adulthood he was never able to enjoy. Fast forward 30-ish years after his death, my grandmother, which is his mom, was living at my parents' house battling an illness. And we were sitting and visiting with her, and she mentioned that she wished she'd get a visit from her son just to let her know that she'd beat this thing. Well, she got up and went to go rest in the bedroom, and the rest of us quietly continued visiting. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, but nothing was there. I didn't say anything because it was honestly freaking me out a little bit. After a while had passed, I looked over and I saw my uncle pass through the entryway as if he was as alive as you and I. He went from one end of the house and down the hallway where my grandmother was. I sat there with my mouth agape and finally shook myself out of my awe and went to follow him. Of course, he wasn't there. My mom asked what I was doing, and I said, I just saw Uncle Jason go down the hallway towards grandmother's room. What was he wearing? She asked. I answered, a Pendleton, but one that I've never seen him wearing that color before. And she asked me what color it was that I saw, and I told her. She smiled and said, that was the one he was wearing when he died. It was his favorite one. You wouldn't know that because there were no pictures of him in that shirt. Well, I think he wore that color when he got my attention to let me know that it was him and not just seeing things or having wishful thinking. He's come around a lot in other ways too. Years before this, his child was coming to my grandparents' house for a visit with a new baby. My cousin was just a toddler when my uncle died, so it was really bittersweet. She had been raised by a drug-addled mother, and we tried getting custody, as did my grandparents, but it never worked out. The relationship between my cousin and my grandparents was one where she'd sort of taunt and say toxic things to them. So anytime she'd visit, it was tense. My grandmother had cried on the phone with me that if her son knew how she felt about his daughter, he'd probably hate her. I told her he'd understand because she was trying so hard and the cousin was just a lot to deal with. On her visit, she was digging through my grandparents' things because boundaries just weren't a thing for her, and asked if she could put some of my uncle's baby clothes on her new baby. My grandmother helped her and gave her a few pieces of clothing to put on the baby just for pictures. My grandparents and I were in the kitchen while this was happening. I kept saying, "Number one son, number one son," in kind of a funny accent. I have a slight bit of Tourette's, and it was really driving me insane because I just couldn't stop saying it, even though I was annoyed with myself. I asked my grandma, "What movie is that from?" and just kept saying it. Sometimes if I can figure out a movie or song something is from, it'll actually help me stop. Grandma said, "That's not from a movie." Looking at my grandpa, she said, "Do you want to tell her what it means?" Grandpa said, "That's how I used to greet him, Jason, his son, when I hadn't seen him for a long time." The urge to keep saying it stopped. I said, "I think that means he is here with us. He sees how hard you are trying, Grandma, and wants you to know he's still your number one son." Grandma turned around and got busy in the kitchen. Grandpa went outside, and the rest of the visit was a train wreck, ending with my cousin stealing a precious item of my uncle's from them, only to call them and taunt them about it. She was just a real peach. Yeah, it sounds like it. Anyway, I've got a million family ghost stories. We've had a lot of early and tragic deaths in our family, to the point my grandmother used to say we're cursed like the Kennedys. But that flannel ghost comment reminded me of all of that. Thank you for reading. Well, thank you for sending that in and sharing that with me and all of us. I think that's very powerful. And I like to believe that our loved ones, when they're, passed on early, are still with us. I think there's plenty of examples to suggest that sometimes they do become our guardian angels. Sometimes they're right there, just a breath away, looking over us. And I think that's beautiful. I know there's some people out there that would disagree with that, and that's fine. Again, nobody knows. There are no experts in any of this, and nobody can say with absolute certainty they know one thing or another about this. But I think it's a beautiful thought. And even if they're not actually our guardian angels, just to know that they're there, that they're still right there with us going through this life, I think that's a very comforting thing. And I love that. I think it's great. Next up is a longtime listener and supporter of the shows, and this is Phil. And Phil's been a great part of my live shows, and every once in a while reaches out. But he sent in a story that I think is really profound, and it has a lot to do with dreams. And I love stories about dreams because dreams are profound. They are amazing things, and oftentimes we dismiss dreams as just some nonsense of a resting subconscious that's entertaining itself while our bodies rest. And I think that there's something much more profound going on in dreams. And I think it's a huge part of our lives, and it's a very significant part of our lives. And I believe it has a lot to do with our spirituality as well. So let's get into Phil's story and see what's going on with him. When I was around 15, I went to bed for the night and had a dream. And in that dream, I woke up in my bed, lying perfectly on my back and straight, as in not one leg one way or the other. And I never sleep that way. Well, as my eyes opened, I looked over to my left, and there was a woman glowing and standing over me, just watching me. She wasn't scary, and I wasn't scared. We didn't say a word to each other. I ended up waking from the dream in the same exact position as I was in the dream. The only difference was there was no woman. Forward years later, I finally explained it to my dad, and he said, "Hold on." He went to his closet and brought back a picture book and pointed out my grandmother. And she had died when I was 4. And it matched to a T. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. I think that's beautiful. I've had several personal experiences with beloved people from my life that had passed on visiting me in dreams, and I've shared them. I'm sure perhaps you've heard it here on the podcast, or maybe you've heard me talk about it as I'm interviewed on other shows or my own live streams on YouTube. But I've had those experiences, and they were incredibly real. More real than me sitting here talking into the microphone recording this episode. So I think that there's really something profound going on. And I think, honestly, that if our loved ones are going to visit us, this is probably the most likely way they're going to do it, because our minds are kind of disengaged. They're at rest. They're not encumbered by the daily stuff that goes on in our worlds. And I think that we tend to be much more open in our sleeping states. So a very cool experience. And thank you so much, Phil, for sending that in. That was truly incredible. Next up, we're going to get to a story that was submitted by a newer listener. This gentleman's been around for a little while now on the live shows, but he's just been a fantastic presence in the audience, and he's had a pretty intense UFO experience, a sighting, and we're going to get into that now. I had a UFO sighting with my father next to me looking at it at the same time. Maybe lasted about 10 minutes long. Unfortunately for me, I don't have any video proof. This happened back on pre-Thanksgiving Day of 1991, and cell phones just didn't exist. If my math is right, I was about 22 years old, and there really was no cell phones, which sucks, but anyway, it's still in my memory like a movie clip. The time of the day was around 4:10 to 4:14 when we first saw it. I made a mental note and looked at my watch, and then it continued to move through the sky quite gingerly or slowly and against the clouds that were approaching it in the opposite direction until it finally settled into one medium-sized puffy cloud, but it was open in the center, so you could see it settle right into it, stop, and then slowly dematerialize. I saw it literally begin to change color from its original bright orange, eye shape, to charcoal black to gray, and then it dissolved. It was super weird and exciting feeling for me at the same time. I had never seen anything like it ever, and then never again after that. This UFO was just a very bright orange silhouette light, with absolutely no surface detail at all, and in the shape of a human eye. Just a very bright orange light, and as it moved across into my line of sight, left-west to right-east, now in the center, it briefly lost its color and turned to a light gray, and then transparent, but with a kind of aluminum-colored thin outline, and I could literally see right through it, as if all of a sudden it had a tunnel going through it. It was exactly like looking down through a dimly lit hallway. I remember squinting my eyes a few times to see how far I could look through it. It was really super freaky and eerie at the same time. I think I even got a bit confused by it for a few seconds. Another thing, there was a point as it traversed the blue sky that it just didn't seem as it was supposed to be there. In other words, it's as if it had been literally cut out from the sky. Like if when you fold a piece of paper and cut out a stencil and then move that across the sky. It had this similar look to it. Again, it was super bizarre. No noise at all. I did notice that when we first saw it from my parents' backyard, there was very brief moments where I thought I saw a few flickers of white light come out, either from it or from its edges. But it was at the start of its appearance. My mom was washing clothes that day and didn't want to be any part of it. I remember telling her that might have been the only time she might see one, but she remained steadfast and just refused to come out and see it. My father was actually the first person to see it, and when he did, he had gone pale and signaled it to me with his head and then fingers. Well, I thought there was a Doberman pinscher behind me or something like this, but I was worried, to put it mildly. But as soon as I turned to look, I quickly saw what he meant. It all started when he was watering his plants, and I was actually looking at what he was doing. I may not have known anything at the time had he not brought it to my attention, since I was absolutely facing the other direction from where it was coming from. Not very high either. I guess that it could have been maybe 1,000 feet or less. And it was the size of maybe between a nickel to a quarter in the sky as we looked at it. So yeah, I have never experienced anything like it and have never forgotten about it to this day. From Jose. Well, thank you, Jose. I think that was a marvelous story, and what an incredible experience. I've experienced seeing UFOs myself, and it completely rocks your world. It's an incredible experience. But, I think that's more and more common. I'm not sure if there's more and more events that are happening, or if there's just more and more people that are talking about it now than ever before. But in any case, we seem to be hearing a lot about UFOs, and I imagine we'll be hearing a lot more in the near future. Not sure exactly what that means, but certainly it's not a taboo subject like it once was, which I think is good. But that's the case for most of this paranormal stuff. I think more people are talking about this stuff now than ever before, whether it's hauntings, cryptozoology with Bigfoots, dogmen, lake monsters, whatever have you, or ghosts, or even strange phenomena like the Mandela effects and stuff. I think there's so much going on in the world, and it's maybe not more than ever before, but certainly we're talking about it now more than ever before, and people are having forums and discussions about it now more than ever before. So I think whether or not there's actually ever going to be an official quote-unquote disclosure, I don't know that it really matters anymore, because I think we're disclosing it to each other. And as more people have experiences, as they share those experiences, it's probably going to be more unusual to meet someone that hasn't seen these things than that has. But I guess time will tell. So very cool stuff, though. In closing the show, I'm going to leave you guys with an audio file that was recorded by a longtime listener of the show. Goes by the name of The Unknown, and he has put together a recording. He's a bit of a producer himself, and did a really nice job on it. So I thought I would let him do all the hard work, and I would just put it on this episode. But a fascinating experience of seeing some shadowy apparitions, and we're going to end the show pretty much with that. So let's get to that now.
I've always wondered if shadow people are real. People tell stories about them all the time, stories about something flickering just out of the corner of your eye, something that disappears the moment you turn to look. For years, I thought those stories were just myths, exaggerations, or tricks of the light, but after tonight, I'm not so sure anymore. 6 months ago, or maybe even longer, it began. I was sitting on my couch, watching television in the dim light of a small lamp. The room was quiet, almost unnervingly quiet. It was the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of everything. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of electricity. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Something moved. I turned to look. There it was, a ball, or maybe the shadow of a ball. I can't describe it any other way. I swear I was staring right at it. For a moment I thought I was imagining it, but then it moved. It didn't roll, exactly, and it didn't bounce in the way a real ball would, but it moved like it bounced, and then went straight up through the ceiling and disappeared, just like that. I sat there, frozen, trying to understand what I had just seen. I turned the lamp on brighter, looked around, checked the room, but there was nothing, absolutely nothing, no evidence that anything had been there at all. For months afterward, I kept wondering if I had imagined it. Maybe I had been tired, or my mind had played a trick on me. But tonight, the impossible happened again, and this time, there was no denying it. Earlier today, I went for a walk to the store down the street. I took only a duffel bag with me, nothing heavy, nothing that could make noise or move on its own. I walked slowly, enjoying the cool air, thinking about nothing in particular. When I got home, I put the groceries away and started cleaning a little, just picking up a few things, straightening what I could. The apartment felt normal, peaceful. I was alone. I was safe, or so I thought. And then, it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement again. I froze. My heart started to race. I slowly turned my head, careful not to move too fast. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But then, my eyes caught the duffel bag across the room. Its handle was moving, slowly, like something had just bumped it. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and stared harder. Nothing was near it. Nothing could have reached it. I don't know how else to explain it. I grabbed a broom that was nearby, thinking maybe, just maybe, it was a bat, a bird, something that had gotten inside. I swung at the air, at the walls, trying to scare it off. Nothing moved, nothing flew. I hit so hard that the broom snapped in half. Still, the bag didn't go anywhere. There was a wall behind it. I was in front of the only doorway. There was no way it could have moved without me seeing it. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and slowly started investigating. I knocked over objects, checked every corner, every shadow. I looked under the furniture, behind the curtains, even inside the cupboards. Nothing. No evidence of anything living. Nothing that could have explained what I had just seen. The strangest part is the feeling. You know, that gut-deep sense that you're not alone. That creeping awareness that something is watching you, studying you. That feeling is real. It's not just in your imagination. It's real. And it hits you hard when you realize that no explanation fits. No logic, no science, nothing. I don't know if it's a shadow person or something else entirely. I've thought about this for hours now, replaying every detail in my mind. The way the first ball-like shadow moved through the ceiling. The way the duffel bag handle twitched tonight. The silence of the apartment except for the faint hum of electricity. Every detail is burned into my memory. What's worse is the isolation. My family doesn't believe me. They never have. They think I'm exaggerating or worse, lying. So why would anyone else believe me? Maybe nobody will. But that doesn't change the fact that I saw it, that I felt it, that it was there, and there's something else, something I can't shake. The first incident, months ago, was subtle, almost playful in a way. But tonight it felt different. Aggressive? No, not aggressive exactly, but purposeful, like it knew I was watching and it wanted me to know it was there. I'm sitting here now, writing this, and I can't stop thinking about it. My hands are still shaking. Every time I look at the corner of my living room, every time I catch a shadow in the hall, I feel it. The awareness that something is there, unseen, observing, waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it's here. I don't know if it's dangerous, but I do know it's real. I do know I can't explain it, and I do know that tonight I saw it again. Maybe someday I'll understand it. Maybe someday someone else will see what I've seen. But for now, I just sit here alone in my apartment, the lamp casting shadows across the walls, and I wait. I can't stop thinking. When I turn my head, will it be gone, or will it be closer than I realize?
Thank you very much, Donnie, for sending those in. Again, that's Donnie's known by The Unknown, and some fascinating experiences for sure. And please, ladies and gentlemen, as you're listening to this show, remember, if you want to be a guest, you're certainly welcome to be a guest. I love meeting new listeners that have stories of their own to share. That's always wonderful. And again, go to paranormalportal.net and click the button, Interview Me, and you can pick from my own calendar app will launch, and you can pick from days and times that might work for you, and we can get together and have a chat. However, if you have stories and you really feel intimidated by the prospect of being on a show, not everybody likes to be a public speaker, and that's fine. If you want, you can email me your experiences. Just send them to paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to narrate your stories much like we did here tonight. So just send them on over, and I'll save them up until I got enough, and we'll do another episode just like today's. So thank you to everybody that did submit your stories. I really appreciate it. It's fascinating stuff, and I appreciate you guys opening your hearts and opening your experiences to me. And I'll look forward to the next one when we can dig into a whole new batch from the mailbag, folks. So until next time, y'all take care of yourselves, and I'll be waiting for you right here in the portal. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows. including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. You all take care, and remember, we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.